Hello and welcome to session 8 of our Tarot on Against the Pandemic 2020. I'm recording live stream sessions for the members of the Tarot Professionals Facebook group, which is part of the Tarot Association, where we have all of our courses, materials, magazines and so forth. So I'm recording live. We're going to do practical tarot techniques. We're going to do answer questions that you might have, and also we have a bedtime story that we're reading from Contes on Pax by Alistair Crowley, and we're reading from that a bedtime story called The Wake World, which is all about tarot and Kabbalah. So what I thought I'd do, as we're sort of in this for the long term by the looks of it in England, as at the time of this recording, and it's happy spring equinox to everyone. Very happy spring equinox. The day and the night are equal, and now it can only get brighter. We've just declared, the government has declared that all of the pubs, clubs, theatres, cinemas, leisure centres and so forth are to definitely close today. So we're soon approaching a sort of lockdown situation ourselves. So it's very interesting times, and I was discussing this with some people today, and the general idea is that a lot of people want the world to change, and then when it starts to change massively, we're all terrified, because of course change is always into something unknown, something unpredictable. Even for tarot card readers, there are perturbations in the pattern of the universe that sometimes we can't quite read our way around, and that's usually for good reason, I think. So what we're going to do today is, seeing as we're settling into a sort of format and a pattern which may change over time, I thought I'd give a practical technique to begin with. So if you're only here for a few minutes, that's fine. I'll give you a practical technique and you can take that away with you, and that will be suitable for all levels, although I may change how that works over time. And then we'll do some general stuff, philosophical stuff. I'll answer questions and so on. So Michigan has been on lockdown for 4 days and so on. And hello Chris as well. So one of the main things that I wanted to do was discuss Kabbalah and Tarot as a general subject, and also how that informs our tarot readings as well. And so we've got our bedtime reading to come later on, and let's have a look. And any sort of questions that people want to ask, you can put in the comments, whichever side of me that's appearing to you. So that's what we're going to do. A practical method, and questions and answers, tarot and Kabbalah, and some bedtime reading each session as we go along. And we've had about 30 or 40 people join the Facebook group in the last hour or so from some mail shots that we did, so welcome if you're brand new here. As I say, I'm Marcus Katz, the author of Tarosophy, and with co-author Tali Goodwin, author of Around the Tarot in 78 Days, Secrets of the Waite-Smith Tarot, Tarot Time Traveller, and about 30 other books as well. So here we go. So practical things. First of all, just a by the by, I never do those memes on Facebook or anything, the ones that say, what is your pixie name or your fairy name? And then they ask you for, type in the first 5 letters of your password, and, then it adds up to, that your princess, the star moonbeam or something like that. Never ever do those. But today I did. I did one that was for my, in effect, what I called my bunker name, my lockdown name, or my pandemic name. And the way you do it is this, and this does not give away any security information, or if it does, then you need to have words with your bank. So I'd like everyone to share, if they would, their lockdown name or their quarantine name, and you do it like this. The first thing to do is just make a note of how you feel right now. What is your general attitude or feeling? So if you want to type that into the comments bar, that would be absolutely great. You don't have to, you can just do it in your own head, that's absolutely fine, or not do it at all. It's entirely optional. So first of all, it's the feeling that you have at the current time, at the current moment. So just incorporate, utilize that feeling, and then make a note of it. And then the second part of your pandemic name is the last thing that you ate out of a cupboard. The last thing that you got to eat out of a cupboard. So not out of the fridge, out of a cupboard. So I'd like to share with you the fact that I am pragmatic digestive. This is my pandemic name, is pragmatic digestive. Or if you want to give a slight sort of air of grandeur to it, then I am pragmatic digestif. So that is now my official name for our lockdown period. And you can refer to me in future as pragmatic digestive, and I will answer to that name. So I never ever do them, so obviously the world has gone mad, because that is probably the ultimate sign for me that I start to do Facebook memes and things like that. So Evelyn is happy M&Ms. Good, excellent. Well, welcome to the group Happy M&Ms. Okay, so let's start with the practical technique then. One card reading. One card reading, do we have a technique for that? And yes, of course we do. This is from Tarosophy, and it's one I use a lot. So there are lots of sort of different, there's a very appropriate one for today. A one card reading method. So if you want to do a one card, I like Blessed India Summer Mix. That's a very elegant title for somebody. Maybe not so much Dormant Star bit, but confused chocolate. So I think these are very appropriate, I have to say. I mean, I don't know you, but let's own our names, shall we? Let's live up to our magical names. It's an interesting thing, actually, because in occult orders you take on a magical name that is your highest aspiration, so it reminds you every time you use that name of your highest aspiration. Pamela Coleman Smith's magical name was Quadtibili or something like that, and it was basically a Latin phrase from a biblical quote, as a lot of them often were, and it meant basically do to others as you would have done unto yourself. And so that was her highest aspiration. She wanted people to respond to her how she felt she responded to them, and it's a little bit bittersweet that perhaps that's not always what she got in life, but certainly she thought that that was something that she wanted to live up to herself, and perhaps wanted other people around her to live up to as well. So there's some factual stuff for us, some research stuff, and hello to Stress Chippy as well. That our magical name is what we want to live up to, what our highest aspiration or value is. So let's take a look then at doing one card readings, how to break down a card. I've chosen a different one into one card readings. What I do with a one card reading is I break the card into a matrix, and there are different ways of doing this, but I wanted to show you a very simple one, a very straightforward one that you can use, and that is it's similar to Lenormand in a way, but it's based on other principles. That you take the top of the card the bottom of the card, the left of the card and the right of the card as separate ways of reading. And I'd actually like to do a reading for someone in the group as a demonstration once I've explained it. So if you can think of a question for me, the first person to pop a question into the column, I'll do an example reading for, just with one card. I'll have to get out my whole deck for that because I only got out a few cards that I can hold. So here we go. I've got these the right way up. There we go. Right, so one card, what you do is you take the top bit as I say, the highest aspiration or the thing that's weighing down on someone, the bottom bit as their foundation or resources, the left hand side as the card is, so on this side the past and this side the future, and that's what we do, and we can do that with all of the cards. So right, so do I write my current job? That's the first question, but I'll need that maybe explaining a little bit. So that's from Marcy, so I'll do a reading for you in a second. So I'm not doing free readings. If you want a free reading, then we've got different groups where you can practice readings. I'd highly recommend, and I'll put a link when we're done to our exchange group where you can have a reading and you can do a reading for somebody else, because we are an educational group rather than a free reading group. So what you do, you take the top part, the card as the aspiration or what's weighing on the person, what they're facing, and we can see that in this card we could take the feather or the bag or even the sun, although I usually go for what's in the top middle of the card, so I go for the red feather as a symbol of what is this person's challenge or highest aspiration. Okay, so do I quit my current job? Okay, we'll come back to that, Marcy. So as an example, what is the highest aspiration of the person is symbolized by a red feather. And what I do with this is I take it as you would take an oracle deck or a symbol deck. So if you had one card that was just a red feather, what might that mean? What would a red feather mean? Now, to me, a red feather would be freedom, but also it would be red, so it would be embodied. So it would be, how can I actually have my and this in fact could be the answer to Marcy's question. Your answer would be the Fool. So I'll go with this card as the answer for your question. So your whole answer is the Fool, which is you're free to do what you want, but you might have to take a step into the unknown, as we would generally read that card. However, if we take it in more detail, we can say what is weighing upon you is how do you embody your highest values? How do you live your red feather, which is truth, the symbol of truth as the feather and something you write with. How do you write your own measure into the universe while still living inside it, while still looking after your health, wealth and body, all of the material things, because it's a red feather. Okay, so that's the highest part of it. So that's both a challenge and also something you want to aspire to. You want to do the right thing, the true thing, the highest thing, while still being grounded in common sense. Then the resources that you can draw on are down here, and this is a golden boot. So the golden boot would symbolize, in this case, when we say that someone is booted from their job, we mean that someone leaves their job. So, but it's a golden boot because you often get a golden handshake when you leave a job. So the resource is actually turning what you currently have as a foundation into something that is golden for you, that takes you forwards. Okay, makes sense? So just Sharon, to join the reading exchange group. It was ignored for a couple of weeks. It might have just been declined because the questions weren't answered or something like that. That group is open to all participants, so you don't have to be in one of the other groups or the Tarot Association or anything. It's a free and open group. But sometimes we get hundreds of requests for it, and we do look at them all very carefully. But sometimes we get behind with it because there are literally hundreds and hundreds of spammers trying to get into groups like that all of the time. So sometimes it can be delayed, but do Sharon reapply, and we'll get you in. I'll keep an eye out for you. Okay, so that's the resource. So that's the highest thing in the challenge, and this is the resource and the thing you can draw on. And usually the next step is obviously the ground that you're walking on. Then the future and the past are here. So the past is the white rose. So the past is the white rose, and that shows here that you may have to take a whole new approach, that has served its purpose, that it doesn't fulfill you spiritually or emotionally in some way, because this is white whereas the feather is red. So it may not even be well paying or rewarding in some way or another. And then in the future we have the stick with the hand. So the hand is holding the stick, which shows that you are holding your own power, your own energy. And so that would seem to assume that you were stepping into something that you knew about, that was in your control and that you owned into the future. So it's not just a question of quitting your job, it's a question of what are you going to hold on to. And you'll notice that this stick goes back up to this highest purpose here, which is the white light that the rose then feeds on, and then that takes you forwards in this sort of triangle of energy up at the top here. So that's basically an example of getting more detail out of a quick one card reading, if that makes sense. So I do write about this in Tarosophy. I think this method is. There's one of several hundred different methods that we use in Tarosophy, generally that are sort of unique to the way I approach the tarot. So this is a way of breaking one card down. Now I usually break it into 9 parts, each of which has its own meaning, but that's in, I can't remember which book it's in, but it's certainly in one of the books. And that helps you break down any card, whichever card it is, into these 9 segments, and then you can spend a whole hour reading one card for somebody quite easily. Okay, makes sense? But there's a simple method, 4 aspects of the card: past this way, future that way, what's weighing on them and their highest aspiration up at the top, and how they get there and how they walk forwards, how they ground it, what the resources that they have to do it here to meet that, to go forwards away from the past. Make sense? And a lot of artists do this unconsciously anyway, because of the way we all think in terms of space, above, below, past and future. So they write that into the cards even if they're doing it deliberately or not, and that's how we know that that method actually works. Okay, so that's the practical one card reading section for today. We're going to go on to a little bit of Kabbalah that I wanted to explain, and then we'll have our bedtime story. Okay. Michelle Hernandez, thinking about Pamela had a particular meaning when she illustrated the cards. Yes, she did. She was, if you read our book Secrets of the Waite-Smith Tarot, we give all of our research in that, myself and co-author Tali Goodwin, and what Pamela, we believe, did is illustrate the cards according to the book T, which is a bit of text written by the Golden Dawn, the founders of the Golden Dawn, likely MacGregor Mathers, William Woodman, and W.W. Westcott. I think that's the right way around. But Mathers probably wrote it. He was riffing off Eliphas Levi, a French occultist, and Pamela shouldn't have had that piece of text because she wasn't at the right grade in the order, magical order, to get it. So Waite probably gave it to her because that was the only source material that they had. It wasn't like he could get Pictorial Key off the shelf because he hadn't written it yet. So we believe that he gave that to Pamela. Pamela went away and then she illustrated it using theatrical resources, all of her own experience, existing pictures that she'd used in children's books, plays that she knew, and we can very easily identify virtually every symbol in that deck according to that simple rule. You take book T, the text, and then you look at Pamela's life, and there's an easy explanation for every single symbol, whether it's the snail on the Nine of Pentacles, whether it's the potato plant and the hoe on the Seven or Eight of Pentacles, whether it's the mismatched footwear on another card, whether it's the roses on a dress in the Nine of Pentacles, even the cat on the Queen of Wands. All of them can be explained by one simple proposition, which is sort of Occam's razor of that approach, that we know that it explains simultaneously every complexity and symbol in that deck without having to go into Kabbalah, without having to go anywhere else other than book T from the Golden Dawn, Waite's own knowledge, particularly in the majors, and Pamela's theatrical background, and that's all you need to explain very clearly every single symbol, and that's all in our Secrets of the Waite-Smith Tarot. Different decks have different illustrations, that's for sure, and we do have methods that teach people. Our 3-minute method teaches people to read any deck that's fully illustrated, like with scenic illustrations for the minor cards like the Waite, and our 10-minute method will teach people how to read any tarot card, any question, any deck, even if it's non-scenically illustrated. For example, the Cagliostro, the Marseille, and similar decks. For example, a playing card deck where you just have the pips for each suit on them. Just to answer a couple of other questions about the one card method, it does help to know symbols and colours, but also dream symbolism. Study a bit of dream symbolism, that will help you understand where most symbolism comes from. Book T is the Golden Dawn description of the tarot cards. Now, they never really made a deck, but they did describe the cards as they wanted them in a deck, but they never actually had an actual tarot deck. But Book T describes the meanings of the cards Kabbalistically, and that's what the Golden Dawn used in their teaching. So it's called Book T. The T stands for tarot, and it was given to members to hand write and hand copy. I've seen some of the original hand copies of it in the Warburg Institute, and you could borrow the original Book T, you hand copied it all out, and then you gave back the original Book T, and then somebody else had a turn as well, and then people copied it from each other, of course. So that was called Book T. But to understand the Waite-Smith deck, you need to read Book T and then look at Pamela's theatrical life, and then that will explain most of the symbols, but we've done all of that for you in Secrets of the Waite-Smith Tarot. Now operators are standing by to take your call. Okay then, right, so Kabbalah. Kabbalah is my main inspiration, and I've now no expense spared for these free sessions. We now have our very own Tree of Life to explain a bit about Kabbalah. If you get lost in this section, then just go back to our previous sessions. We've got 6 or 7 of them already, and I've explained a little bit about the Kabbalah already, and particularly why it relates to tarot and how you can use it for reading tarot. Most of my methods of reading tarot come from a mixture of NLP and Kabbalah. So I treat tarot as a living language and a language of our relationship between what we perceive as ourself and the universe that we sort of perceive as outside of that self, and the interface between those two things. I see tarot as arising in that gap so that it explains anything can be explained and allows us to change it as well, interact with it or engage with it, which we'll get onto in tarot magic in a future session. So here's our tree of life. It's called the tree of life, and it's a diagram used in Kabbalah, and Kabbalah means a sort of a spoken oral tradition that's passed on by word of mouth, but of course it was soon written down and then developed in writing, and then it was translated into Latin and German, and then people like Mathers and Crowley, then Westcott translated it out of the original Hebrew, out of the Latin, out of the German into English during the late 1800s, and that's how it came into Western esotericism, although some of the French occultists had started to utilize it before then, and map the Hebrew letters and the tarot cards to each other, and that's where we sort of begin with our tree. So the tree of life is a map. It's a map of the universe, and anything can be put on it or taken from it. And it starts with Kether, which is up here, and you don't need to write this down or remember it because we're just going through the general principles. And Kether is a Hebrew word, Kether, and it's spelled Kaf Tau Resh, and we put the vowels in English so we can transliterate it and explain it. Sorry, actually say it and pronounce it. So that's Kether, the crown, and then we have Malkuth at the bottom, which means kingdom, and this is right at the bottom of the tree of life. And there's a real secret in Malkuth as well, in the letters that are used, that we explain again in the book Terosophy that I explain. And these circles are not really circles, they're emanations, they're numerical emanations. Okay, so you must never call them spheres or circles. I really, it's one of my hobby horses when someone says the sphere of Geborah or the sphere of Hesed or whatever. They're not spheres, they're not circles, we just have to write them like that, but there are different ways of writing it. For example, in concentric circles coming out from Kether out to Malkuth on the outside. This is just one way of arranging them. And Kether is up at the top. There are 22 lines that connect them, and strangely enough, all 32 of these objects, elements on the tree, both the Sephiroth, the numerical emanations, which are Sephira singular, Sephiroth plural, are counted as paths as well, because the light comes down and it zips down into manifestation down at the bottom, and the snake of our evolution crawls back up the paths up to the top. So these are paths as well, so sometimes you might see these called the 32 paths, but they're divided into 10 Sephiroth or emanations out from the middle, the top, and 22 Hebrew letters that then connect them. And of course there are 22 Hebrew letters and 22 major arcana. So there we go, and so they map quite nicely, and to numerology of course, because numerology works from 1 to 9, astrology, if we add the elements, the planetary symbols, the planets and the signs of the zodiac, we sort of get 32 as well, although we have to double one up down at the bottom, which the Golden Dawn had a nice answer for, because they had to map a number of planets, astrological symbols, so 12 astrological symbols, 7 known planets, and 4 signs. They don't quite make 32, so they just fudged it a little bit down at the bottom and gave a good reason for it. Okay, so does that make sense? So that's the Tree of Life, part of Kabbalah, Jewish mystical system that maps the universe through the use of Hebrew letters connecting 10 emanations. And the only thing I'd like to say for today is that Kether, it's very important that if we can get our heads around this, it's sometimes called the point, and it's the point from which everything comes. And sometimes people, particularly in Western esotericism, see that as a point that expands outwards, like the Big Bang, they call it. Now, to me, the Big Bang doesn't happen until down here, because this is where time exists, and it doesn't up here, but that's sort of technical matter. What I'd like you to do is imagine Kether not as a point, but imagine that there is everything, okay? So there's just one everything, and as a result of there just being one everything, there really isn't anything, because you can't say that's something, because there's no you and that to point to. There's just one everything, and that's it. There's just endless light and everything, and that's it. So that is called the Ein Sof Ha'er, and that exists above Kether, and we can't talk about it, we can't explain it. Anything we say about it is wrong. It's just everythingness, undifferentiated cosmic light, being, the divine, the unknown, the negative anythingness. You can't even think about it, but it has to be there because everything else is inside it. And we know it's all one thing at some point or another. There has to be one thing, even if it's broken down into lots of things. Now, what happened, according to the Kabbalists, is from the Ein Sof Ha'er, what happened was that nothingness withdrew. In effect, it sort of took a deep breath in, like that, and it made a space inside it. So if we can imagine that there's all of this everythingness, and then all of a sudden it sort of withdrew itself to make a something in the middle, a space, a gap, a something that wasn't the nothingness. So it had to separate itself and withdraw. Like, where it withdrew into, no one knows, because it can't withdraw into anything, but it did. So it made a gap of nothingness. Then in that nothingness a spark formed, and that spark is Kether, and out of that, because that gap was made out of everythingness, everything could manifest. Wow. And that's really the source of the Tree of Life, and a nice mystical meditation that you can use to try and break your brain a little bit, which is what the Kabbalists do. They teach us to meditate in permutations and thinking about the model to allow our brain to change state into higher states. So we start from the top. If you understand that, you become illuminated, and then you can come back and explain the Tree of Life to the rest of us. So that's what it is up at the top. It's a everythingness that is nothingness, that is infinite nothingness, that is everythingness, and that withdraws itself. It makes a space, and then in the middle of the space forms a spark that is made out of a reflection of the nothing that is everythingness, and that spark has everything in it, and that point then differentiates itself into Chokmah, Bina, and then it comes down 10 layers, is a convenient way of mapping it, and then we end up where we are right now. But that's going on all of the time, and so what we're seeing at the moment is this process happening in real time right now, right here. And that's when we link Malkuth and Kether together, and then have a state where we can actually recognize that that's happening right here, right now, all of the time. So that's the of Kabbalah, and yeah, there's no th in Hebrew, so it's Kether. That's a tau in the middle, so it's kaf tau resh in Hebrew is how that's spelled. But it's a little bit beyond what we need to do today, so I'd like to leave you with that, as our first map, and then we'll come back to this many times over the coming days, weeks, months, year. But now it's time for our bedtime story, and we'll see where we are on the tree. I'm just going to read this straight out because we are in the 7th house, and we know where we are on the tree because we are talking about over here, and we have the moon path here, so you'll start to recognize roughly where we are because we went sort of a bit this way over our first few days. And Lola Daydream is heading up the tree of life with her fairy prince, and she's describing the story. So now for our bedtime story. And I'll put my glasses on for this, if you'll excuse me a second. There we go. Okay. Right, so here we go. This is Lola speaking. There were 3 ways into the 7th house, and the first was such a funny way. We walked through a pool, each on the arm of a great big beetle, and then we found ourselves on a narrow winding path. There were nasty jackals about. They made such a noise, and at the end I could see 2 towers. Then there was the queerest moon you ever saw, only a quarter full. The shadows fell so strangely. One could see the most mysterious shapes, like great bats with women's faces and blood dripping from their mouths, and creatures partly wolves and partly men. Everything changing one into another. And we saw shadows like old ugly women creeping about on sticks. And all of a sudden they would fly up into the air, shrieking the funniest kind of songs, and then suddenly one would come down flop, and you saw she was really quite young and ever so lovely, and she would have nothing on, and as you looked at her she would crumble away like a biscuit. Then there was another passage which was really too secret for anything. All I shall tell you is there was the most beautiful goddess that ever was, and she was washing herself in a river of dew. If you ask what she is doing, she says, "I'm making thunderbolts." It was only starlight, and yet one could see quite clearly, so don't think I'm making a mistake. The 3rd path is a most terrible passage. It's all a great war, and there's earthquakes and chariots of fire, and all the castles rising up and breaking to pieces. I was glad when we came to the Green Palace. It was built of malachite and emerald, and it was the loveliest, gentlest living, and I was married to my fairy prince there, and we had the most delicious honeymoon, and I had a beautiful baby, and then I remembered myself, and only just in time, and said, "Kiss me." And he kissed me and said, "My goodness, but that was a near thing that time. My little girl nearly went to sleep." Most people who reach the 7th house stay there all their lives, I can tell you. So that is the story of the 7th house of Netzach on the Tree of Life, and the challenges and experience of being there. So it is levels of consciousness, levels of awareness. Indeed it is. That is the best map of the Tree of Life. And in the initiatory system, the Western esoteric initiatory system that I teach, we use that as a map to know what state we're in and how to get to the next state. Even if it is, like Lola is saying, a lifetime journey, that we can get trapped in each of the spaces as we go up, and for good reason. Yeah, it's a very brilliant story. Alistair Crowley could write in all sorts of different styles, and it does show a lot of tongue-in-cheek reference to some of the mystics and some of the mystical challenges in the spiritual life in a deliberately silly almost a story and a silly voice for it. But it's a nice story to read, and it has a lot of truth in it. And also, I wanted to read something to begin with in our series, because we are going to go a long way with all of these if you'll stick with me along the way, because I wanted to encourage people to go and read more Crowley, more other mystical writings, particularly based on Kabbalah and Tarot, because then you can see how it can be used in that context as well. So that's great. Thanks a lot for your attending. We're about 40 minutes, which is really where we want to be aiming these for. And I look forward to giving you a practical tarot technique tomorrow. I think we'll talk about a bit of tarot magic tomorrow. We'll do a bit more Kabbalah. I'll take any questions from now until tomorrow, bring those into the next session, and I'm rolling questions on as we go along, so that we've always got some of the questions that you want to ask actually answered as we go along. So thanks a lot for your time. Again, a very merry solstice. We're already at the solstice. A very merry spring equinox to you. The light is equal today, and let us hope that we can continue to look towards the light and constantly head that way. And those flowers there are for the spring equinox today. So thanks all for your time and attention. Any questions, pop them in the feed, and we'll take a look at that. See you tomorrow if you can make it, or in the recording. This is a wave to those watching this as recording. Thanks a lot for your time and attention. Bye for now.